Hello, welcome to New England Authors. We record here in Cambridge, Massachusetts and broadcast around the region of New England. Our guest today is David Zeltserman. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kameel.
Okay, you've written about 20 books and under your name and under the name Jacob Stone. We're going to talk about some of them. We can't talk about all of them. We're going to talk about some of them. Some of your books were named by the Washington Post, by NPR, by the Library Association as the best books of the year. And one of the books, Small Crimes, was made into a film. So I'd like to start by talking about your latest book, which is Husk, which I read. And I have to tell you, Dave, this isn't a genre I read most of the time, but I found myself really captivated by the book from start to finish. Well, what's the genre that this book is in?
You'd call it horror. But it's not the typical horror novel. It's really a love story wrapped inside of a horror novel, and it's instead of it's not really the bloody, gory horror. It's more creepy, a sense of dread permeating the book. A very quick description of Husk would be Charlie Husk is in love. He's moving to New York, and he's a cannibal.
Yes. He in fact belongs to a tribe of cannibals, a clan of cannibals, which is hidden in New Hampshire, right? Some in the backwoods of New Hampshire. And it's not hard to imagine a little region of New Hampshire or Maine or something that's completely isolated where there could be this secretive clan. And the protagonist's job, right? What's his job? He's to go out and collect.
One of his jobs is to go out into our world and collect stragglers to bring back to the clan. The book is based on a mythology that there would be hidden cannibal clans throughout the world, and these cannibals are not quite human. They're a little different.
Yeah.
And they're a little stronger than us. They're faster than us, and they're driven to eat human flesh. They have no control over that. They need to do that. And Charlie is a little bit more thoughtful than the average clan member. He likes to read. He's more interested in the world. So he takes to that job to go out into our world and collects stragglers very well.
Because he's been out to the world, he knows a little about the world. And what happens is he's on the Mass Pike, and he sees a young lady who's going to be his next victim, right?
Right.
But he falls in love.
He finds himself, for the first time, looking at one of us as something other than food. And so he surprises himself by not putting her in a sack and throwing her into the back of the van. Instead, she's stranded at this Mass Pike stop, and he offers to drive her back to New York.
To her home in New York, yeah.
And once he does that, and he can sense that the feelings between them are mutual, he decides as long as there's a chance to be with her, he's going to abandon the clan and try to live like one of us. So the novel, in a lot of ways, is a stranger in a strange land type of novel.
Yes, it is, but it's also a Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. He's not really a beast. He looks pretty normal, right?
Right, but he's quite a bit different than us. He doesn't quite, while he's been in our world and he's read a lot, he doesn't quite understand our world, and he's also driven by these cravings which he's trying desperately to ignore.
The cravings for flesh.
Yes.
So now his new girlfriend now has another friend who's kind of looking out for her, and she's very suspicious of this guy, right?
She's rightfully very suspicious.
Rightfully very suspicious, and she finds that he has no posts on social media at all, and wonders who this guy is.
Right. She's a thorn in Charlie's side from almost the beginning.
Yeah, and lo and behold, he finds another tribe of these cannibals, right in Brooklyn.
Yes, there's a hidden clan within Brooklyn that's their job. Their life is a lot easier than say his clan. They don't have to go out very far to collect stragglers.
So when you say this is a mythology, what mythology is it based on?
Oh, it's just a mythology that I made up for the book.
Oh, that you made up.
So it's just a mythology that kind of runs through the book.
Yeah. So I don't want to give the story away, but can you tell a little about what happens to him?
I think we've probably gone enough into. I mean, Charlie's wants to get a job. He wants to be able to
go native.
He wants to be able to go native.
Yeah.
He wants to be able to live in our world, and he wants to be able to start dating Jill, who's the girl he has fallen in love with. And for that, he needs money. And he enjoys doing things like building houses and construction. And the problem is he doesn't have a Social Security card. So so even though he's born in New Hampshire, he has to live as a undocumented alien in effect.
Right.
And so that's one of the struggles that he has to overcome. And the other struggle is how can he avoid the cravings? How can he find a solution? Because if he's going to live in our world, he wants to. He knows that it would destroy Jill if he resorted to cannibalism.
Yeah, and so there's always this thread in the book, whether he's going to make it, whether
Right.
he's going to really become native, and there's other things that tear him apart. For example, one time he. Don't tell me if I'm giving the story away, but he kills a policeman just because of his strength.
Right. Well, he's startled.
Yeah.
One night he needs to get outside. He can't stay cooped up. He finds a place in Queens to, lie under the sky by a lake, and he's startled by a flashlight in his face, and that has him reveal his true nature. And once that happens, he has no choice but to, by revealing his true nature, it brings up this fight or flight response in the cop, and at that point it becomes something Charlie can't control.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, how long did it take you to write this? Was it something that you got right away, or did you?
What happened with Husk? I was invited to contribute a story to an anthology of cannibal tales, which was not something I really wanted to do. But Lawrence Block was going to be in the anthology, and if Lawrence Block's going to be in the anthology, I was going to be in it. And so I came up with a story that I actually liked. Like Husk, it didn't rely on blood and guts. It relied on more tension and creepiness. And this story had a woman, she's going to Vermont. Her boyfriend had bailed on her on their weekend, and she picks up this guy at a stop on the Mass Pike and offers to give him a ride, and she's strongly attracted to him and ends up driving him back to the clan without really realizing what she's doing. And that got the idea flowing on how to flip the story on its head and write almost the exact opposite story. And once I started thinking about that, I had to write Husk, and I think it took me about 4 months.
Oh, good, yeah. Well, as I said, it really kept my attention all the way throughout the book. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I tend to write. Even when I write horror, there tends to be a kind of a noirish aspect to my horror novels.
Yeah, there isn't much horror in this. There isn't. I would say the horror is cannibalism, but
it's more of the dread of what could happen,
right?
As opposed to, again, it's not written to be a bloody horror novel.
Yes,
it's written more as suspense, sense of dread, sense of creepiness, and also kind of an offbeat. His travels in New York, I think, are kind of interesting.
Well, very good. We're talking with Dave Zeltserman, and he's written over 20 books. I can't go through them all, but I'd like to talk about Small Crimes, which became a film. Can you? And I know you said that the movie was very different than the book that you wrote, and the movie was very interesting. Why don't you try to summarize what you wrote first of all, and then we'll talk about the movie.
The book it's a noir book. You have this disgraced ex-cop. He had committed a horrific act to try to save his life 8 years earlier. He knew that the DA was building a case against him. He broke into the DA's office thinking he could destroy evidence, and he ends up just committing a terrible act. And he's protected by different people within the local. You know, this all takes place in a fictional small Vermont town. He's protected by some local sheriff and others, and he, instead of going off to prison like he should have, he ends up in a local jail for 8 years, treated very easily. And now that he's out of jail, in his mind, he wants to redeem himself. He wants to just not cause any more trouble in his life. He wants to make amends. He wants to connect with his family, his wife and children. And it's just not in the cards for him. Yeah. Nothing's going to work out because he's not willing to do what's really necessary for true redemption. And it's going to end very badly for not only him, but everyone anywhere near him.
It's a tragic story. He's a tragic character who's been in prison and a former cop.
And it follows the noir outline of someone crossing a moral line, and once you do that, you're doomed. You know, no matter how much you might try to kid yourself otherwise, you know, once you've crossed that line, there's just no turning back.
So what happened? Did the filmmaker approach your agent, or how did that work?
The way it worked was I had this film company call me about another book. Oh. So we were talking for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months about another book called The Caretaker of Lorne Field, and we never mentioned Small Crimes. And then when they finally made me an offer, instead of making me the offer for Caretaker, they made it for both Caretaker and Small Crimes. And so it came right out of the blue.
I see.
And I thought that I actually had 2 other film deals at the time, and I thought that Small Crimes had the smallest chance of getting made, but it ended up being the first one made so far.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have any input into the making of the film?
I sat down with the director early on, and we had dinner, and we talked about the book, and Evan Katz directed and wrote it with Macon Blair, and so I would talk to him off and on, and when I saw the script, I gave him feedback. He took about half of it and made changes based on probably about half of my suggestions, and there were quite a bit of differences between the book and the movie, but he still was able to capture the feel of the book.
Right.
So he captured the spirit of the book, even with all the changes. And when you look at how you're going to film a book that would take 4 hours, if you were going to film it faithfully and squeeze it into an hour and a half and do it under certain budget constraints, I think he did a really nice job. And the acting was just great across the board.
It's very interesting film to view. Yeah.
And I could have been in it. The film was.
Oh, it's how often the author is in the film, a little role, right?
There's a scene where a ex-cop spits in Joe's food and starts calling him a bunch of
Oh,
names.
that's right. Yes, yes.
And the director liked the idea of me doing it, and the producers liked the idea of me doing it, but the film was shot in Montreal, and the Canadian version of the Screen Actors Guild would not let them give the part to me.
Oh, I see.
So if
I
things
see.
had worked out a little differently, I could have been spitting in Jamie Lannister's food.
Now, I know we can't get through all your books, but let's talk about why do you write under a pen name, Jacob Stone?
Okay, I was talking with an editor at Kensington Books for a while about writing a series for them.
Yeah.
And so we were going back and forth on what type of series I could write. And when we finally came up with a agreement, she wanted me to use a pen name so that the series would be distinct from all the crime and horror novels that I'd been writing. And they didn't want it to be kept secret, but they just wanted, for branding, Jacob Stone books are these.
Yeah.
So it was all like a branding thing. If I could have, I would have left my own name on it because I actually like the books quite a bit. I think, they're serial killer books, but I'm trying to push the boundary for the genre and write something a little different. So while they're thrillers, they also have a very strong crime orientation to them, and I think some of the plots are pretty cool. I think like the next one in this series is one of the best books I've written.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll look out for what's the name of it?
The next one's going to be called Unleashed.
Unleashed. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll look out for it. So so that series is a serial killer.
It's a former cop named Morris Brick and his agent and his investigation agency that he's formed, and for a series of reasons he gets involved in chasing serial killers in each book.
Uh-huh.
But what I've done is, and what I tried to do was not just make them deranged serial killers, even though the first book is called Deranged. I try to give them more interesting motivations. And actually, the title that I wanted for the first book was The Things We Do, and they wanted for branding, snappy one-word titles.
Right.
So it's not really a title that I'm happy with, but
the editors make the title. Yeah, the publisher make the title. This is New England Authors. We're talking with Dave Zeltserman, who's written about 20 books, and by this time now you have a pretty good following of readers. Do you know their demographics?
I think a lot of my readers are people who really like noir and like crime fiction, and I get emails from all types of people. So I don't know if
Male, female?
yeah, male, female, different ages. So I think I have a pretty wide sampling of readers, but they tend to be people who like tough, hard-boiled crime fiction or dark, noirish type novels. Things that are a little different, a little quirkier than a lot of the stuff that's out there.
So how many series do you have?
I've got the Morris Brick, Jacob Stone series, and then I'm writing mystery stories for Ellery Queen,
Ellery Queen
Mystery Magazine, and so this series is a bit of a pastiche on Neil Wolfe. The main detective is named Julius Katz. Julius, Nero, Katz, Wolfe.
Oh, yes.
And Julius has his assistant named Archie who narrates the stories, but in my case, instead of Archie being a flesh and blood man, he's a little piece of advanced technology the size of a tie pin that has his own personality, has the personality of a hard-boiled PI, and he has one desire, and that's to beat Julius to the punch in solving a case, and he never does it. He comes close once, but he never quite does it.
Are there is any of your books not contain murder?
I have a horror novel which I thought of as more of a more of a fable called The Caretaker of Lorne Field. And while there's a death in it, I don't think it's, I don't, you know, it's left up in the air to the reader on whether it's a murder or not.
When did you start writing, Dave?
I worked as a software engineer, and all my training was math and computer science, but over the years I was always kind of drawn to trying to write. And at some point I wrote something that I thought was good enough to get published. It was a short story, and I sent it off to a magazine. So that my very first short story I wrote, I sold to the first place I submitted. And then it was all downhill from there until I wrote Small Crimes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wrote 2 more books after that.
Oh, how old is Small Crimes?
Small Crimes, I wrote initially 2003, and I sold it in 2006, and it got published in 2008.
Oh, I see, I see.
And the 2 novels, I wrote another novel called Fast Lane. I wrote that I think in 1990, and then did revisions from 1990 to 92. And eventually I sold that to an Italian publisher first, and then to a very small press.
An Italian publisher in Italy, you mean?
Yeah.
They translated and published it?
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
And then the second book I wrote it in '96, and that got published in 2007. So I was very stubborn and persistent in it, but it took a while to get those first 2 sold.
Now you've won some awards, right? Can you tell us what?
My Julius Katz stories have won a Seamus Award. Seamus Award is given out by the Private Eye Writers of America.
Yeah.
Derringer Award, which is given out by the Short Mystery Fiction Society, and it's won 2 Ellery Queen Readers Awards, which are voted on by Ellery Queen's readers on which story in the magazine that year was their favorite.
And these have been these mystery writers have been your heroes. You've tried to read them, and
Rex Stout is one of my favorite writers, and Dashiell Hammett is probably my favorite. The amazing thing with Hammett, he wrote 5 novels, that's it, but each of them were basically created a whole different subgenre of mystery fiction.
Are they all, by the way, are they all in third person?
I'd say my books are pretty well split between first and third. So, you know, the Julius Katz stories are all, Archie's narrating them, so those are all in first, but my novels are, I'd say it's probably 50-50.
Did you do any true crime?
No. No interest in true crime.
You're just a fiction person.
Right.
And now you devote full time to fiction, or?
I've been doing that, yes.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
There aren't very many people who can do that.
Yeah. I might not be able to do it too much longer, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
You know.
And I imagine you write many hours a day.
Once I get deep enough into a book, it becomes, I get kind of obsessed with it, and it becomes something that I just spend all my waking minutes on.
So what you're working on now, did you say?
Right now I'm working on something that's very different than these crime and horror novels. I'm working on another fable of sorts, and I don't really want to tell too much about it. But I have a couple new novels coming out over the next year. I have the 5th book in my Jacob Stone Morris book series called Unleashed. And I've got, I think, one of my most interesting books, this book called Everybody Lies in Hell, which is a mix of detective, noir, horror, fantasy. And like the book says, it takes place in hell.
We're talking with Dave Zeltserman. This is New England Authors, and I find, as I say, I find your books very readable and down to earth and going through. Do you think the future of fiction is strong?
I think there are a lot of very talented people working out there. I think you know, what I find kind of interesting is I've been asked by several self-published PI writers to blurb their books, and these books are really good. I mean, these are people who should be getting published by the mainstream press, but you know, nobody's publishing PI novels anymore.
Yeah.
So I do know that there's a lot of very good writers out there.
Well, what's the most popular fiction genre now?
Probably sales. It's probably romance.
Romance, yes,
Yeah,
of course,
and
yes.
thrillers are very popular. Sci-fi is very popular.
But you've gotten feedback from younger people, right?
Right.
So it's not like old people are reading these books. A lot of people are reading them.
Yeah.
And before we go, we're getting into our last minute here. How would you kind of try to summarize your career? How's it shaped up?
I started off choosing a genre that was probably the toughest thing to get published, noir. You know, over time I've learned that instead of just writing what I really want to write, I have to find a compromise. Write something that I want to write that's also something publishers want to publish. Mm-hmm. And you know, so I've been moving from noir to horror to thrillers, and I'm beginning to make some inroads with films. Again, Small Crimes is made, and I think I have a good chance of seeing a couple more films made in the near future.
Oh.
So, I think I think I'm on a slow path up.
Okay. Well, all the best to you, Dave. It's been really a pleasure talking with you. It's been a pleasure reading Husk and Small Crimes. This is New England Authors. Thanks for being with us. Remember, watch locally,